Welcome everyone to Ammonia Energy Live, our first episode for 2022. In this series, we explore the wonderful world of ammonia energy and the role it will play in global decarbonisation with a bit of an Australian twist. First of all, I'd like to begin by acknowledging our traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm on Wurundjeri country in Melbourne, and I extend out my acknowledgement to country wherever you are in Australia and indeed all around the world. So to kick off in 2022, we're going to widen our focus a bit and we'll consider where Australia fits in the emerging ammonia energy supply chains that will eventually span throughout Asia Pacific. One organisation that's been very diligent in investigating all aspects of these future supply chains is Sumitomo. Sumitomo is a Tokyo-based trading and investment house. And over the last 12 months, we've seen a number of ammonia announcements come from them that concern Australia and Singapore. And it's these updates we're here to talk about today. For a global multinational like Sumitomo, how do all these little pieces join together and actually push the case for ammonia energy forward? So to explore all this, we're joined by Alana Barlow, Sumitomo Australia's National Hydrogen Commercialisation Manager. She's based in Brisbane. Alana is leading Sumitomo Australia's hydrogen strategy project development in Australia, and she has extensive experience in international trade, mineral resource and power infrastructure projects across the country. It's lovely to have you with us, Alana. Please submit your questions via the Q&A function. You'll see at the bottom of your screen. You can upvote and comment on each other's questions if you wish. We have a number of pre-submitted questions lined up for Q&A, and we encourage you to keep sending through questions for our speakers when you register for our events. We'll also put a recording of this up on our YouTube channel ASAP. So let's get into it. Welcome, Alana. Thank you for joining us. Can you introduce yourself and can you tell us when ammonia first came across your radar?
Thanks, Julian. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, even virtually with everyone around Australia and perhaps the world as well. And also want to thank you for being able to reschedule this for me. Queensland floods wreaked a little bit of havoc for us personally, but also for many other people here in Brisbane. So appreciate the opportunity to reschedule. Now, as you said, I work for Sumitomo Australia, based here in the mostly sunny state of Queensland, and I am looking after our national hydrogen strategy, focusing on our domestic hydrogen markets, as well as looking towards our export ambitions once those export markets start opening up. So I've spent the last 15 years working across international trade, power, infrastructure, energy and resources industries, and I've also practiced as a lawyer. But I have seen the light, and I am enjoying my current path in the energy transition. And boy, is there a lot of work to do in this space. So hydrogen and ammonia as clean energy resources, they've been on Sumitomo's radar for many, many years, and here in Australia, at least since 2015. Given the existing supply chains and handling procedures for ammonia, we see it as a key early mover for international clean energy exports and imports as well.
Excellent. So we'll start with all these announcements that have come out of Sumitomo in the last 12 months. Where would you like to start with all this news?
There's been a lot. Look, Sumitomo Corporation, our parent company based in Tokyo, is, as you said, a diversified trading and investment house. Fortune 500 company, more than 70,000 employees worldwide. And when I say diversified, I really mean it. Our business divisions range from lifestyle products, media, where we own a cable network station in Japan, to transport, construction systems, mineral resources, and now the new energy innovation initiative. Sumitomo has a long trading history in chemicals, and we have dabbled in the ammonia markets here and there from time to time. We are very focused on hydrogen forming a critical part of Japan's future energy mix, whether it be as liquefied hydrogen, MCH, or ammonia. And not just Japan, but the rest of the world too. Now, the Sumitomo ammonia announcements that have come out in the last 6 to 12 months or so have been driven by our marine bunker fuel and shipping departments globally. Now, for those of you who don't know, there have been 3 critical announcements that we've made. Firstly, in March 2021, we announced, along with our partners Maersk, Fleet Management Limited, Keppel Offshore and Marine, and the Maersk McKinney-Moller Centre for Zero Carbon Shipping, that we would conduct a feasibility study into ammonia bunker fuel applications in Singapore. And this announcement and piece of work is what has triggered the following two projects. So in addition to that announcement, we've also announced Sumitomo Corporation and Keppel Offshore and Marine would further explore ammonia fuel applications in Singapore. That's where we're exploring downstream applications, which are crucial to achieving the net zero ambitions. And thirdly, we announced that we are working with Ashima Shipbuilding Company in Japan. What do you need if you're using ammonia as marine fuel? Well, you need vessels. So Ashima are manufacturers of dry bulk carriers, and we are jointly working on the design and development of an ammonia-fueled dry bulk carrier. Now, this is a really critical step in the journey towards ammonia as a bunker fuel becoming a reality. Our aim is to be a one-stop low-emission service for shipping companies. Now, the attitude towards ammonia in the maritime industry has shifted dramatically in the last 2 years. LNG was often seen as the key vector in reducing emissions. The International Maritime Organization, IMO, has set a target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030 and then 50% by 2050, based on, I think it was 2008 emissions. Simply speaking, we don't think that LNG can do the job on its own. And ammonia is a promising alternative marine fuel, which can help carry the load. We do need to be looking at net zero applications too, though.
Excellent. Love the one-stop shop approach. So there's definite themes here, and there's key locations, Japan, Singapore, and Australia. So let's start with Singapore. What role does it play in the future ammonia energy supply chain?
Julian, Singapore is the world's largest bunker fuel location, with approximately 30% share of the bunker fuel market globally. So Singapore is a critical location to look at for the transition to ammonia as a bunker fuel. There is significant demand. It is in critical shipping routes, and importantly for Australia, is not very far for ammonia export. So Sumitomo has an existing bunker fuel trading business in Singapore. So we are well placed to help facilitate this transition, as you can see in our various projects in the region. So with bunker fuel in Singapore, there is a huge opportunity for ammonia demand, and that means big opportunities for clean ammonia producers in Australia.
Excellent. So here's a question. When do you and Sumitomo expect maritime bunkering of ammonia to be ready and commercially available?
Mm-hmm. Well, the challenge right now is that final investment decision, or FID, has not been achieved on any substantial clean ammonia projects. So ammonia supply is an issue right now. Likewise, FID on downstream applications is also pending. So we have a chicken and egg situation here, as is the deal with most hydrogen projects, to be quite honest, the proverbial chicken and egg. So for ammonia bunkering to become a reality, it really is dependent on ammonia combustion engines for vessels being developed. And that a stretch, hydrogen-powered vessels too, if hydrogen cracking is to be considered. Our feeling on the market is that we will see FID on ammonia engines being reached around 24-25, with 2026 more likely as the commencement date for commercial, not pilot, operations. The technology for ammonia combustion engines and hydrogen engines for marine vessels is still developing, so more time is needed to realise this. We are going to be waiting though until the end of the decade before we see ammonia powered vessels deployed in any great number. So there is time for all of us to prepare.
Excellent. We'll move on to some of these other hotspots in a minute, but I'm really curious. Do you see ammonia fuel bunkering as perhaps the key to unlocking future ammonia supply chains?
Julian, is ammonia bunkering the catalyst? Absolutely. One of the biggest challenges that faces clean ammonia projects right now is offtake, and offtake at scale. With the scale of energy usage in our shipping lines, ammonia bunkering offers that at-scale demand for our ammonia producers. And that means that we will see the economies of scale with the cost of clean ammonia falling. That will make ammonia as a fuel source more attractive to other users. So one of the projects that we are working on in Singapore is exploring the downstream uses and supply chain for ammonia in power generation. Of course, other organisations are also exploring this in Singapore and looking more generally at hydrogen applications, including the cracking of ammonia for this purpose. So if we're seeing this in Singapore, we will see this in other large bunkering markets too.
Excellent. So we've got a transit hub. So let's make the stuff. Where in Australia would you expect to see ammonia production coming from, and what volumes are you thinking?
Let's tackle volume first. It's really easy to speak whimsically about projected ammonia and hydrogen offtake volumes when offtakers aren't putting their money on the table yet and signing contracts. But what we know is that Japan likes to lead the way. You probably will have seen in the news recently that in Japan, JERA have released an international tender to select companies seeking the supply of low carbon ammonia from 2027 onwards. Here we're talking about approximately a 15-year offtake for up to 500,000 tonnes annually. And that ammonia will be used for power generation in Japan. Critically, the ammonia must be clean. And that means it does not emit carbon in the production process, or the carbon is captured and stored. Carbon credits or offsets will not work for this particular supply. And I think we have some great budding projects in Australia who can respond to and supply this JERA project. As for potential Australian supply locations, well, look, a few months ago, I would have said that Bell Bay in Tasmania would be Australia's first at-scale green ammonia projects. But I think as we've seen recently, access to renewable energy is not as simple and cost-effective as once thought. So we are seeing a few challenges in those projects there. And then there is the whole other issue of certification and guarantee of origin, which hasn't quite been settled here in Australia as well. Now, look, we're seeing a lot of movement in the west coast of Australia as well for hydrogen and ammonia projects. Which of those will see FID is another question. But given the access to renewables and in some locations, the water resources, we've got great production potential in WA. And additionally, the number of quality ports and proximity to export markets will see WA be a really favoured contender. But Julian, you know my heart and my business case rests with Gladstone. Japan and Korea, they're critical ammonia markets, and Gladstone is very well positioned from renewables, water, quality of the port perspectives, and their downright readiness to get started on hydrogen and ammonia projects. So my money is on Gladstone, but I suppose it has to be, given we have a hydrogen ecosystem project there. So
that's a very interesting way of putting it. The idea of an ecosystem. So with Gladstone, I'm curious why you would spend so much effort building a whole network of hydrogen-related infrastructure in just one concentrated spot.
So in Gladstone, that's more broadly a hydrogen ecosystem project, so not an ammonia specific project there at the moment. But there are some key learnings from this project that can be shared across the different hydrogen vectors. So why are we focusing our efforts on an ecosystem there in Gladstone? Because it is incredibly important to demonstrate those downstream applications. The biggest issue in hydrogen and the ammonia space right now is offtake. So as a trading house, our job is to facilitate, and starting small is important. Demonstrations really are critical. We need to show that it works, and we also need to build social license. And what better place to do it than Gladstone, the heart of industrial Australia, and a beautiful location at that. And I do want to talk a little bit about social license. Last year, we undertook some work with IDEO, an international design house, and Arup, and we spoke to people in the community and even outside of the Gladstone community and sought their views. They are supportive of a green energy transition, excited even for a hydrogen ecosystem and what it could mean for them in their town. But it is very hard to build social license when hydrogen is a gas that you can't see, smell, touch, or feel. So demonstrations such as mobility and industrial applications are crucial. Last year in October, we worked with Toyota to bring their second generation Mirai to Gladstone. I don't know if you've been in a spin for one, but pretty fast cars. Just don't let me behind the wheel. But we got the Mirai to Gladstone for the Gladstone Engineering Alliance's hydrogen conference. And on day one, Toyota was kind enough to take the conference attendees and even a few locals for a spin in the car. You know what those people said? How unremarkable it was. It was just the car and it was quiet. Of course, there's a slick design in the car, and I wouldn't mind a Mirai myself. But to see that it's just a car and not a spaceship was actually a really defining moment for many who had a chance for a ride. And sure, it's not the glitzy star in the sky style announcement. One car visits Gladstone. It isn't a headline. But it is so very important that we don't forget our communities, and indeed our regional communities at that, because they're going to be at the very heart of this energy transition and the hydrogen and the ammonia projects. They will be doing the heavy lifting, the hard yakka even, to help Australia and the rest of the world decarbonise. So we covered social licence and how demonstration can help from a community perspective. But our industrials are a key hydrogen market in Gladstone too. Gladstone is one of Australia's largest greenhouse gas emitters in the vicinity of approximately 10% of Australia's total emissions. So there is opportunity to decarbonise, but how? Well, we're working with Rio Tinto to incorporate hydrogen into their refinery processes in their alumina plant. Sure, it's just another pilot plant, but what we can't forget is that this is actually a really critical pilot for the global aluminium industry. What new or existing processes can we switch to using zero emissions fuel in order to decarbonise? That's what needs to be explored at the moment. So to demonstrate a harmonious community and industrial centre utilising hydrogen and its derivatives in a successful and innovative way creates a template for other cities around the world. And that's why it's really critical to focus on one region and to deploy a number of hydrogen initiatives to show it can be done.
Fascinating, fascinating. I'll change tack a little bit and ask you about what the current challenges are in Australia. As a follow-up to that, it seems all the big players are getting together in Singapore. Could we see something similar to that here?
Look, in terms of ammonia as a bunker fuel hub, the big players are there working there because it's a huge bunkering market. It's a key transit hub. The size of Australia's bunkering market is not as big, but there is still an opportunity here in Australia. The key challenge and perhaps opportunity here in Australia is that much of the conversation here is focused on Australia as a producer of ammonia, a producer and an exporter. I don't think that we're seeing enough discussion and conversation focusing on Australia as a user of ammonia. And I think more work needs to be done on that. We are a significant resources and manufacturing market here, and those industries will have to decarbonise at the same rate as the rest of the world if we want to see Australian exports remain competitive while the world transitions. So yes, we do need to be having those conversations with our big players, the steelworks, the aluminium refineries, the smelters, the cement manufacturers, and even our power generators. And we need to be talking about what role ammonia can play in their plan for decarbonisation. And herein lies the domestic opportunity. Excellent.
So what about Japan, the ultimate destination for Australian ammonia? What needs to be built or redeveloped there?
Well, we can see with JERA's work today that they are looking at ammonia for power generation. We will see the adaptation of existing power plant to be able to co-fire ammonia with coal on the pathway to reduce carbon emissions. But it's not just about that technology, as you know. Receival infrastructure at ports will need to be developed, as well as storage, transportation infrastructure to the end user as well. It's no mean feat, but it is necessary work that needs to be undertaken, and Japan is taking some significant steps towards developing that.
Excellent, excellent. So how do we check off these extra needed items we have? What are the key next steps for Sumitomo and for the ammonia energy community in general?
Well, look, the joy of working for a trading house like Sumitomo is that we're never looking at just one part of the problem. We are examining and investigating the entire supply chain, taking an overall view of the issue and the problem solving along the way. Matching supply and demand is really critical. And thankfully, that's something that we as trading houses do best. What we are seeing in the hydrogen and ammonia space right now is that it is not enough to simply have a good idea to build an ammonia plant in a certain location. You need serious partners with off-takers to get your project off the ground. Otherwise, it is just another good idea at the wrong time. And timing is everything to success. Now, the JERA ammonia tender presents a very good opportunity for a few projects to get their baseload customer which will pull all of those project strings together in a nice little bow. But what I think we need to do as a business community is focus on downstream ammonia applications and how that helps with decarbonisation. Once you unlock offtake and the demand side, you can get to the easy part, hydrogen and ammonia production.
Very good. Thank you. We've covered a lot in a very short space of time. We'll finish this section of the conversation with a hypothetical that I'd like to put to our guests. If you could snap your fingers and magic something into or out of existence that would help this transition along, what would that be?
Well, we talk about the proverbial chicken and egg, don't we? So let's get that egg to hatch. Let's get the ball rolling into this brave new world of decarbonised fuel. As I said, we really need for projects to be hitting FID as soon as possible. And that is the proverbial hatching that needs to happen. There is so much uncertainty at the moment that once the first matched upstream and downstream project at scale gets underway, my feeling is that we'll see many, many more follow suit in rapid succession. So let's hatch the egg.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much. Let's have a look at some questions now. There's a couple of audience questions in the Q&A section and also the chat. We'll go to a pre-submitted question first from Penelope Howarth at DFAT. What do you see as the nearer term uses for ammonia and hydrogen in developing countries in Southeast Asia and also the Pacific Islands?
Look, power generation is definitely one. We understand there is a relatively new fleet of coal-fired generators across Southeast Asia. And the reality is that we're not going to see those simply discarded in favour of greener electricity solutions. But what we are likely to see is their modification to co-fire ammonia, which is being demonstrated by JERA at the moment. The other is also ammonia bunkering, as we've discussed today, a really great opportunity for decarbonisation of an entire industry, which is really motivating.
Excellent. I might ask a combined question here that's from the audience, from Alex and Les, and that's about the safety aspects. What kind of work is Sumitomo doing on the safety aspects of transporting, handling, storing ammonia?
Well, look, ammonia is a dangerous chemical. We are taking all due steps in terms of looking at our engineering and our advisors to be able to develop these projects in a safe and sustainable way for the benefit of our communities. But also, as I've spoken about with Gladstone, we have to really work on the social license of working with compounds such as ammonia or even more basically hydrogen. There's a lot of miscommunication when it comes to the actual nature of ammonia or hydrogen and their relative safety. So it is really critical that we get the messaging right and we are communicating the actual risks, not the perceived risks to the public. So working with the best experts is certainly one of the strategies, but also really understanding that we have to work with the community and not treat them as a at arm's length stakeholder. We have to really bring them into the fold and work closely with them.
Excellent, thank you. Darren Jarvis has got a pre-submitted question and also a couple of live ones, so I'll wrap them all together. The pre-submitted one is: a key challenge for projects is securing offtake to align with the investment period and power purchase agreements. How are you dealing with that? And one of his pertinent live questions is, without specifics, what sort of hunger are you seeing out there for those long-term offtake agreements?
So when we talk about, as we often say, success is not about having a good idea, it's about timing it just right. So for Sumitomo, we are developing hydrogen projects where offtake can be matched with demand. Balancing supply and demand is what we do best, and we sit on both sides of the equation there. This means facilitating end-use technologies. In the same way, we are working towards a hydrogen ecosystem in Gladstone. There, we're planning to start with the demonstration-sized projects, for example, mobility applications, and the hydrogen calcination project we're working on with Rio Tinto. But they aren't demonstrations for the sake of just saying, look what we can do. They are meaningful steps towards achieving social license for the new energy era, taking steps towards the economies of scale for production, and decarbonising those industrial processes, which will unlock demand worldwide. On the economies of scale question though, our approach is to take it step by step, measured, to build it up gradually, because it won't happen all at once. We are talking about a transition, not an overnight snap change. So building up that scale will take time, but you can't miss steps along the way. Today, it's not enough just to be an energy producer. You either need to facilitate downstream applications or partner with someone who can. In terms of those long-term offtake agreements and the thirst and the appetite for it, you need to have the downstream application. The technology still needs to be developed and verified. So while that technology is being piloted at the moment, you're not going to see large offtakes coming through, but that will change quite rapidly. We're foreseeing that change happening within the next 2 years. So it will come, but as I said, it's not a snap overnight change. So we'll have to wait, be patient a little bit, which is good because it gives us a bit more time to develop our producing projects here in Australia.
Excellent. And it's onto those producing upstream applications that we look at next with a question from Trishul from Kinara Power in India. Does Sumitomo have a material appetite to invest during the development stages of green hydrogen and ammonia projects?
Absolutely. Sumitomo is investigating in all elements of the value chain for the new decarbonised energy world through our new department, the Energy Innovation Initiative. Now, we're already taking stock of hydrogen and ammonia projects globally, and we're developing our own, of course, too. We are actively developing, not simply looking at equity investment. But those projects need to work for our off-takers and have the right timing. As I said, it's not just a matter of having a great idea, it's about getting all of the key components to align in order for the project to be successful.
Okay, excellent. I might ask you for something from the chat from Jian An, and the old chestnut that always comes up, blue ammonia versus green ammonia. Is there a view on it? Is it a versus? We're curious.
A couple of things I'll say about that. Firstly, Japan's position and the off-taker's position is that green or blue is fine. We're talking about carbon emissions reduction here. So in reality, one of the biggest issues will be the price. If we can get green ammonia on par with blue ammonia, there'll be no question as to which one's favoured, I think. But we're not seeing that price parity yet, and we're not expecting it to happen for quite some time here. And I think that Japan, as a country that is almost entirely reliant on energy imports, they have to take a very pragmatic and practical view, and not discriminating between blue or green is I think very sensible. But they are coming out and clearly saying now that they're not particularly interested in hydrogen or ammonia that is produced using offsets. They do want to reduce the carbon emissions in the hydrogen or ammonia production process. The second thing is the topic of, in the last 6 weeks or so, the mood has really shifted in relation to blue versus green. You know, I've been in a variety of different conferences and discussions where it's become very clear that blue versus green is a really emotive debate, and it's a debate that we don't necessarily need to be having right now, because what we need to be focusing on, as I said, is reducing those carbon emissions. Any step that we can take as producers to reduce those carbon emissions is a positive step, and it's the right step, and something that we should be doing right now. If we forsake technologies right now before they've even had a chance to commercialize and potentially reduce the cost of our ammonia, then what we're doing is cutting off our noses to spite our face a little bit. We need to be using any means we can to try and reduce our carbon emissions and our carbon footprint. And when we're talking about blue ammonia, we're talking about carbon emissions largely being captured. That's got to be better than steam methane reforming with no carbon capture.
Yes, exactly. And that's a very interesting comment in the wake of JERA's condition on their tender for contract that at least 60% of the emissions of the hydrogen production process have to be captured, with a view to probably raising that in the future. So you're right, it is an interesting and very recent shift in that debate. Very interesting. Another question from Darren, who, by the way, we're getting on the other end of the microphone at the end of the month, which I can't wait to do.
I'm excited to hear from Darren. I'll give him all the answers. No.
Exactly, because normally he's got all the questions as well, so it's going to be fascinating. On that idea of a one-stop shop, are you proposing to act as a facilitator that connects the supplier with the consumer, or as an off-taker yourself?
Both. Absolutely both. So Sumitomo Diversified, we're invested in a handful of projects all over the world, not necessarily in the exact same supply chain, but sometimes we are. So as a trading house, we like to trade products. Energy is one of those. So certainly we like to match producers with off-takers, but we also want to be producers in some circumstances too, and we also want to be off-takers in other circumstances too. Our power infrastructure department, for example, very interested in decarbonised energy sources so that they can continue their power generation. So there's a lot of different roles that we can play in this, and that's the beauty of being of working in a place like Sumitomo. We get to look at the entire problem. We're not looking at just one facet.
That's really interesting, and that's why it's been great to have the conversation today, because a global multinational like Sumitomo is not one we've really spoken to before on Ammonia Energy Live. And you're right, there's so many facets. There's so many ways ammonia can be involved in that business. So yeah, that's interesting. Well, thank you very much, Alana. I will wrap up today's episode of Ammonia Energy Live. Thank you very much to our live audience for coming along. I really want to say a special thank you. We had to reschedule this. The flooding in Brisbane has been really, really bad. Alana has been affected. And I want to thank you so much for being so flexible and for coming on and giving some really good answers and some good content. So thank you. I do appreciate that a lot.
Delighted to. Thank you, everyone.
And so because we took an extended break over the holidays, we're actually going to bring you another episode this month on Thursday, 31st of March at 2 p.m. AEDT. We put long-time interviewer Darren Jarvis in the spotlight, and we'll talk about Incitec Pivot Limited's recent moves to make green ammonia at their Gibson Island facility in Brisbane. It's a fascinating case study to explore, really interesting story. So make sure you register and come along, and we'll find out where that project is up to. I will send you the details for the registration to your inbox later today. Thank you to Alana for being our guest today, and we will see you all later this month on Ammonia Energy Live. So thank you very much.
Looking forward to the session at the end of the month. Thank you.
Thank you. See you all. Thank you.